They called me the family failure, but the room did not know what lived in his fiancée's clutch. One buzz, then two, and the air shifted like the second before a summer storm. Watch how a single fact placed at the right time can unwind a story built on noise. The ballroom at the Peninsula Chicago glowed like a warm hive chandeliers casting honeyed light over glass and polished marble. A jazz trio kept a tasteful rhythm, while servers slipped between gowns and tuxedos with trays of tiny tartlets and caviar toasts. I stood near a side wall where the light went soft, and the air felt cooler 2 steps from an emergency exit and 3 from a palm in a brass planter. My fingers found the silver bracelet at my wrist, the one my grandmother pressed into my palm the week I left for college. A small, cool ring of metal. I touch when I need to steady the noise inside my chest. Across the room, my parents orbited my brother like bright satellites. Linda in a sapphire dress that caught every sparkle in the room. Robert with a golf tan and the satisfied posture of a man who believes the evening reflects well on him. They had found the prices near a floral arrangement the size of a compact car. Richard Price shook hands in the measured way of old Chicago money. Eleanor Price wore the kind of calm that comes from decades of foundation dinners. They all leaned in as Ethan narrated his latest wins, each detail landing like a well-rehearsed line. A server approached too quickly and the tray tilted. I caught the edge without thinking and steadied it. Diego Alvarez, the catering manager, stepped in behind me and whispered a quiet thanks that was really an apology for the near spill. His eyes flicked to my dress and away again. I gave him a small nod. It was not my job to help, but it kept my hands busy and kept people from cornering me with small talk that always turned into something else. A woman in a beaded gown touched my elbow and asked where the nearest ladies' room was. She did not ask if I worked here. She simply assumed. I pointed her toward the hallway by the elevators and watched her go, then tracked my parents as they guided the Prices across the floor to the circle that had formed around Ethan. He caught sight of me and lifted his chin in a silent, "Come here." The room smelled faintly of gardenias and expensive whiskey. I took a breath that reached my ribs, then crossed the marble to join them. Ethan introduced me to Richard and Eleanor, as if unveiling a painting in a gallery I did not belong in. His smile carried the same shape it had when we were kids, and he thought he had discovered a new way to get under my skin. He said that I had an artistic temperament, that I never cared much about money, that our parents kept hoping I would settle into something practical. It was not unkind on the surface. It was precise in the way a paper cut is precise. From the corner of my eye, I saw Madison Price, his fiancée, watch, rather than smile. She had the alert poise of a woman who reads people for a living. I tried to step back. Ethan closed the space. He said that I would find a stable job eventually, that we all take different paths, some of us just walk them a little longer. A small laugh traveled the circle light as a clink of ice. My mother lifted her glass and added that I had always been idealistic. My father tipped his head toward Richard and said that Ethan had always known how to deliver at the right moment. My bracelet felt heavier than it really was. I let my fingertips rest against it and kept my face quiet. Diego moved through with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and I helped him transfer a row of spoons to a fresh platter, so a waiter could take them to a table of donors. He touched his chest once in thanks and dissolved back into the staff. If I kept my hands moving, I could stay present without becoming a prop. When I turned back, Ethan was already leaning into his next line. He loved a crowd. He loved a narrative where his light grew brighter by shading someone else. He opened his arms as if delivering good news and announced to the group that his little sister was the family failure. The words landed soft and clean. A few guests offered the kind of chuckle people use when they are not sure whether they are hearing a joke. The rest waited for my face to give them permission to enjoy it. I let my expression stay steady. The bracelet cooled my skin. Richard Price shifted his weight and studied me the way he might study a property line. Eleanor folded her hands and let out a small breath that meant nothing and everything. My mother looked past me as if something fascinating were happening near the band. My father scanned the room for another handshake. I saw Madison again at the edge of the circle. She did not look away. Congratulations to you both, I said. I kept my voice low and even, and gave Madison a brief nod that included her and excluded no one. Then I reached for the tray in my hand, as if that had been the point of my standing there all along. A waiter arrived and I passed it to him. His fingers brushed mine, and he looked grateful without knowing why. I stepped out of the ring of bodies, each breath easier than the last, as the sound returned to normal volume. The trio shaped a minor chord that felt like cool water. I followed the line of the wall toward a service station, set down a stack of empty flutes that had silently accumulated in my hands, and pressed the bracelet once more. The metal held the room steady. From where I stood, I could still see them. Ethan was animated and golden under the chandeliers. My parents were pleased to be in orbit. The prices were evaluated with the tact of people who have been evaluated all their lives. Madison was still watching her phone somewhere in her clutch, or her hand, her eyes not moving off me, even when someone touched her shoulder. The evening was only just warming up. I felt the air shift in that almost imperceptible way it does before a summer storm. The room thinned to a hush behind my ribs, and memory unrolled like a clean ribbon. I left Chicago for Massachusetts in 2010 and crossed the river of adulthood for the first time 4 years later with an MIT degree and a suitcase that smelled like detergent and library dust. The bracelet sat in my pocket during finals week and in my palm at graduation. I learned to carry pressure without leaking it onto anyone else. I learned that silence could be a choice and not a surrender. 2 years after that, I finished Stanford and came home with a mind wired for hard problems and a habit of explaining ideas with data instead of volume. I took contract projects, saved every dollar, and listened more than I spoke. At family dinners, Ethan filled the table with his news first. New fund, new deal, new trip. My mother loved a headline, and my father loved a win. When I tried to share what I was building, the conversation bent like heat over a highway and slid away to safer subjects. It was not cruel. It was a drift that taught me where the edges were. In 2021, I opened a small office with bad carpet and good light and named it North Star. I did not hang a mission on the wall. I kept working. Naomi came on first because she could hold 10 things in her head and set them down in order. Janelle later because she could say one sentence that landed where 3 paragraphs would not. We built in the quiet release by release, pilot by pilot, the bracelet a cool ring on my wrist when the week ran long. By the time spring of 2024 arrived, the public markets had learned our name by necessity. The offering cleared clean. I let other people speak into microphones. I went back to my desk. I wrote a letter to the team that said thank you, and then I deleted half of it until only the true parts remained. My parents sent a text with confetti. Ethan wrote nothing. That absence told me what I needed to know. It told me to keep my expectations small and my focus exact. The first weeks of 2025 moved like fast water. Coverage picked up and cameras found our doorway. I still rode the train until one morning a teenager filmed me at the platform and a blog guessed my building. I called Marcus and he became part of the circle around my days. He waited at the curb at dawn and at midnight and never tried to talk through a red light or a feeling. Privacy is a kind of oxygen. I guarded it because it kept me sane enough to lead. The bracelet tapped my skin as I sat in Dr. Alana Pierce's office one rainy Tuesday. She had a small clock that did not tick and a chair that let me breathe. She told me to picture a room with doors that I could open and close. She said boundaries are not walls. They are choices about what you allow to touch the part of you that is most alive. She said leaving a conversation can be love for yourself, not punishment for someone else. I sat with that until my shoulders dropped. I wrote it down on a sticky note and put it in my wallet with a coffee receipt and a reminder to call Thomas. So tonight, I chose quiet on purpose. Not the silence of a cornered child, but the stillness of a woman who knows what happens when people mistake her calm for consent. I could correct a stranger who thought I worked the floor. I could answer a joke with a sharper one. I could make a speech that turned the room polite. None of that would protect the part of me that runs the engine tomorrow morning. The choice was not about pride. It was about priorities. My work needs my energy more than my ego does. The orchestra changed keys, and a slice of conversation reached me. Ethan laughed. Robert promised someone a tea time. My mother smoothing her dress with the hand that used to smooth my hair. I felt a flick of tenderness for them that did not erase anything, only clarified what belongs to me and what does not. I set a glass on a tray and let a server take it the rest of the way. When I looked up, I found Madison across the room. She stood near a marble column, one hand near her clutched shoulders, level eyes steady. She did not flash a smile at me to signal goodness or step forward to create a scene. She simply held my gaze long enough to make it clear she was actually looking, not scanning, not performing, seeing. She gave a small nod that carried more respect than an apology would. It felt like a hand laid gently on a table between us. I returned the nod and let my breath loosen. Noise swelled again around the dance floor. A waiter lifted a tray and passed. I slipped my fingers over the bracelet and felt the metal cool as lake water on a hot day. Strategic silence is a muscle. Mine held. The night did not know it yet, but it had just met its limit. Clusters of Ethan's friends and colleagues settled around the auxiliary bar like a tide pooling at glossy wood. The bartender moved with quick wrists, citrus in the air, a thin mist of tonic catching chandelier light. I stayed within reach of a service station where a stack of linen napkins waited, and where I could put my hands to use if my temper thought about standing up. Ethan held court with the ease of muscle memory. He told a story about a college case competition and bent it so I became the earnest sibling who wanted to perfect a slide while he landed the room with charm. Laughter found him on cue. He kept going. Deals closing's a flight that made the connection by 3 minutes because he calculated the odds and sprinted. He painted himself as the man who always arrives. He painted me as the one who lingers. My mother drifted in elegant and attentive, and added that I had always had an artistic soul. She meant it as a kindness. It served as a velvet boundary that suggested my priorities lived somewhere outside billable hours. My father followed with the warmth of a man proud of his son and the momentum of a big event. He bragged about the wedding timetable, how Sophie Grant had secured the best band, and how the venue confirmed a second tasting. He said everything was handled. He said Madison deserved nothing less. I felt the bracelet cool against my wrist and loosened my jaw so I could breathe through my nose. Diego slipped by with a tray of blinis that looked like small moons. I steadied the tray for him over a rough patch in the carpet, and he murmured something that carried gratitude without asking for attention. I stepped aside so a photographer could pass. The camera caught a flash of Ethan's grin and the satisfied tilt of my father's head. I let the light slide over me. Ethan noticed my distance and crooked a finger. He wanted proximity to complete the scene. Richard and Eleanor Price had joined his circle, and he wanted me inside it. I walked to the edge of his radius and stood where I could see both the bandstand and the bar mirror. He introduced me again this time, with the easy rhythm of a man telling a story he knows lands. He said, "I took the long road." He said some people are late bloomers. He said it as if the room should be patient with my narrative arc while he delivered the closing act tonight. Richard weighed me with the polite appraisal of a man who has hired and fired enough to see patterns. Eleanor's expression stayed courteous, neither dismissive nor indulgent. She watched to learn where the seams were. Madison stood close enough to catch every syllable. She did not correct him or cradle him. She simply watched. I could have played in the debate. I could have corrected a timeline. I could have reminded him that bloom is not a schedule, it is a climate. The bracelet cooled my skin, and I heard Dr. Pierce in my ear telling me that leaving a frame is sometimes the only way to reclaim your name inside it. So I chose an action that took me off his stage. I reached for the nearest tray at the service station and offered a calm line that I use when I need to redirect without drawing blood. If anyone needs an extra hand, I can help get these to the back. My voice stayed level. My eyes stayed on the work. A waiter blinked surprised, then smiled and took the tray from me. Diego appeared with a fresh rack of flutes, and I shifted them to a polished shelf so he could move through the crowd. The simple choreography was a portal out of the scene Ethan had been writing for me since we were children. I could hear him behind me, still warm, still gilded, telling the end of his anecdote with timing that would have impressed a speech coach. Robert slid into a conversation about seating charts and families who care about which side of the aisle counts as honor. He mentioned how the planner kept the price guest list clean, and how the rehearsal dinner would be small and tasteful. Linda touched my forearm and said I had always seen the world a little differently and that it was a lovely trait. Then she let go as a couple she knew approached for hugs. The bar mirror held our overlapping shapes for a second and then dissolved them under the next pass of light. I centered my weight over the heels of my shoes and let my breath refill my chest. A server thanked me for moving the flutes. I nodded and looked past his shoulder to where Madison had stepped half a pace out of the circle. Her posture was unchanged. Her attention sharpened as if a lens had clicked. She lifted her clutch slightly, and I saw the faintest pulse of light inside it. The first vibration was soft. A second followed too quickly to be a chance. The sound threaded the small quiet between sentences and drew 3 pairs of eyes, even though no one wanted to appear nosy. Madison angled the clutch in her palm brows, narrowing just enough to register that her screen had delivered something it considered important. The room continued to hum. The band eased into another standard. Ethan reached for a fresh glass that had appeared at his elbow. A third vibration cut through delicately, a B against glass. For one beat, everything around our circle felt suspended. I watched her inhale steady, then lower her gaze to the message that would decide the shape of what came next. The bracelet cooled, and I knew the evening had shifted, even if the chandeliers refused to admit it. Attention moved like a current. It started at Madison's hands and traveled outward, as if the room could feel a barometric drop no one had predicted. She stood a half step outside the circle's shoulders, squared a calm center that made other people adjust their distance without knowing why. Her clutch opened. White light brushed her face. Her eyes thinned the way a professional does when a headline arrives that could alter a narrative in real time. She angled the screen so the small group could see. My own face stared back from a gray suit against the glass of North Star's windows. The skyline dim behind me, the Forbes masthead clean and hard. Madison's voice did not rise. She read in a steady, clear cadence that the headline named me a billionaire CEO, that North Star was one of the biggest tech IPOs of last year, that we had recently completed a deal with MedSite using a mix of cash and equity, and that we were working with multiple federal agencies and more than 40 Fortune 500 companies at different deployment stages. She scrolled once and the light shifted again across her cheekbone. The conversation around us thinned, not because people went silent, but because they began to listen with their eyes. A glass broke at a nearby table, a bright crack that cut the air and fell into small crystal notes on marble. The band lost half a bar, then recovered. The chandelier glow felt cooler. Ethan stopped mid-gesture, one hand lifted fingers apart, as if he could still catch the moment that had already passed him. My mother's jaw held a smile that no longer knew where to land. My father tried to find another handshake and failed. Eleanor Price drew one breath deeper than the rest. Richard measured the scene the way a man measures a storm line and a dock at the same time. Madison did not move her eyes from the screen. She did not look at Ethan to guide him toward an expression. She did not look at me in search of denial. She read what was in her hand and let the words make their own weather. I felt the bracelet cool my skin and steadied the ground under my feet. I did not raise my chin. I did not step forward. I said yes, that is me. 4 words. No need to add weight where the facts already stood. Ethan blinked twice and drew in a breath that hitched. He practiced presence for a living and could usually find a line to redirect a room. Tonight the lines scattered like minnows. His mouth shaped a syllable and lost it. The circle waited for him and then stopped waiting. Richard asked a question in the tone of a man accustomed to due diligence. He wanted to know whether our hospitals would be locked into a single cloud vendor or whether we designed for flexibility across environments. I answered with the minimum needed to be exact. We built a layered architecture staged pilots that run on premises, and in the cloud encryption is independent of the platform, audit trails are portable. No protected health information leaves the control of the provider. He nodded once, a professional reflex that signaled he understood the point and the guardrails. Eleanor exhaled not in disapproval, but as if rearranging her mental seating chart of the evening. The social math shifted. The value of a small politeness changed hands. Across the bar, a photographer lowered his camera and did not lift it again. A server hesitated near our circle as if he had wandered into weather above his pay grade. Diego stood 10 feet away and pretended to study a tray while his eyes made sure I was not alone. Madison lifted her gaze from the screen and met mine. A minute earlier, her expression had been the neutral kindness of a host. Now there was something else. Not awe, not calculation, respect. The simple kind that is built on seeing what is in front of you and naming it without embroidery. She turned the phone toward Ethan and I watched him absorb the image of me in a suit he had never seen and a life he had not asked about. He closed his fingers and opened them again like a man relearning how to hold a glass. My mother reached for her earrings, a tiny nervous gesture that sends light skittering. My father cleared his throat and did not speak. Somewhere behind us, a waiter refilled water and overfilled it, and dabbed quickly with a napkin until the rim gleamed. The band stayed on track, the drummer quiet enough to give the room space to decide how loud it wanted to be. Madison did not say anything more. She did not need to. The article spoke. The image spoke. The absence of denial spoke. I let the facts sit between us like a clean white plate set in the center of a table. I kept my voice in my pocket. I kept my posture easy and my feet where they were. Richard's attention returned to me. He asked one last small thing, not to test me but to complete a loop. He wanted to confirm that our deployment schedule included third-party audits for security and fairness. I said yes, and added that independent review is part of every contract because trust is a system, not a feeling. He accepted that, and the conversation did not need more. Madison's eyes softened without losing focus. The curve of her mouth changed the way light changes at the end of a clear afternoon. She gave the smallest nod, and in it, I could feel the difference between courtesy and regard. I let my fingers find the bracelet again. Cool, silver, steady pulse, a quiet thread running through the noise. The room resumed its practiced sparkle as if a stage manager had cued it. Inside that brightness, something fundamental had turned. The circle breathes again, but not the same air as before. Linda finds me first. Her hands are careful on the stem of her glass, and her smile is a thin ribbon that keeps slipping. She tells me she is sorry in the way a person apologizes, while also protecting the version of herself she can live with. She says she loves me. She says the evening got away from us. The words touch my shoulder and fall. I nod once because there is no point in catching them. Robert steps in with the warmth he saves for big nights. He says he is proud, and then he admits something I have heard in different flavors since childhood. He says he is proud in part because of how this looks. Pride and optics braided together like a rope he does not think he is holding. I thank him in a voice without edges. I let the comment sit where it lands. If I pick it up, I will have to carry it home. Eleanor Price stands a measured distance away and waits for the air to clear. She does not flinch from what just happened. She is a woman who has chaired 1,000 rooms and knows when a message needs a clean channel. She says there is a gala next weekend, and she would like me to attend if there is a concise media note to ground the story in facts. She is careful to keep it professional. She does not ask me for a speech or a rescue. She asks for clarity, that I can respect. I tell her my team will handle any statement. I add that I do not speak about private family matters, and I will not start now. She inclines her head once, and something like relief moves through her shoulders. It reads as respect. We both understand the line, and neither of us intends to smudge it. Ethan lingers at the edge of my sightline. His brightness has gone a shade too white. He is deciding whether to reach for a joke or a pivot. He looks at Madison and finds no cue. She holds her ground with that calm PR posture that turns heat into light. Richard watches the room the way a captain watches water read the wind. Diego hovers near a service station and gives me a glance that asks if I need anything. I shake my head. Linda touches my forearm again. She begins a sentence about how people misunderstand creative spirits. I set down my glass and answer clearly. I say I am not staying in a story that paints me as a failure. The words come out even. They require no volume to carry. Linda blinks. Robert blinks. The sentence does not bounce. It lands and stays. My phone buzzes against my palm. Naomi has texted. She writes that a senior executive guest just posted a story from across the bar and that a local lifestyle editor has already reposted it with tasteful wording and a careful caption. She adds that morning outlets may lift the clip. She asks if we want to place or respond. I type back that there will be no personal comment. Facts only through PR. No quotes from me. Eleanor hears the buzz and reads my eyes without asking. She says the right people will appreciate a restrained approach. She changes the subject gracefully to a donor who cares about medical equity and makes a mental note to seat them near the right ears. She has been doing this dance long enough to know when a single step keeps a room from tripping. A small silence opens and then closes like a door on a soft hinge. I look at Madison. She lifts her chin a fraction. The message is clear. She saw what she needed to see and does not plan to unsee it for anyone. Ethan takes a breath to speak and stops. He is not sure which version of himself will help him now. I gather the few items that have collected in my hands without my noticing. A napkin, an empty flute, the smallest spoon. Diego appears as if he has been waiting for me to give him a reason to move. I pass him the glass. He thanks me under his breath and disappears into the stream of staff. I turn to Eleanor and Richard and offer a simple wish for their evening. I do the same for my parents and for Madison. I do not linger for responses. The words are a clean exit, not a test. I step into the aisle between tables and feel the floor steady under my feet. The band plays a number that was popular the summer I left for college, and for a second I see my grandmother's hands fastening this bracelet around my wrist. I let the memory touch me, and then I let it go. The elevators sit behind a panel of mirror and brass. I press the button and watch my reflection come together. Not the girl who learned to swallow rooms whole to keep the peace. Not the woman some people will now try to chase for different reasons. Just a person who knows where the edges of her life are and is willing to guard them. The doors slide open and two guests step out, talking about flights and seating charts. I step in. The lobby lighting brushes the steel. The music fades to a pleasant blur. I look once across the ballroom to the circle where the evening first tilted. My mother holds her glass like a buoy. My father shakes a hand. Ethan looks for a line he cannot locate. Madison stands steady, her phone dark now, her posture saying enough. The doors begin to close. I feel the bracelet cool against my skin, and I hold that temperature like a decision. The last thing I see is the chandelier splitting into 1,000 small constellations in the mirrored panel. Then the gap narrows. The ding lands clean, and the room disappears. City lights slid across the car roof in long, soft bands as Marcus turned us off Michigan Avenue toward River North. The quiet hum of tires and the faint click of a turn signal felt like a metronome resetting my pulse. I leaned back, let the glow of storefronts pass over my hands, and opened my phone. I told Naomi to lock the interview slot with CNBC for Sunday noon and to confirm that the segment would air Sunday night. I asked her to push confirmations to the calendar and to route all inbound media to Janelle without exception. We passed the river. A late boat traced a white seam on black water. I pictured the ballroom shrinking in the rear view, the chandelier light receding to a pin. I told Janelle to draft a neutral statement that stayed strictly on technology and patient benefit, and that made no reference to private family matters. I told her to keep the language clean of hype and to avoid any phrasing that could be read as promotional. She replied with a draft subject line that already sounded like an answer key for the right questions. I felt my shoulders drop a fraction. As we pulled under the canopy at my building, Thomas pinged with a note about disclosure guardrails. He wanted a Saturday morning pre-brief with Harold to scrub language for compliance and to double-check that nothing in the segment touched material non-public information. I told him I would be ready at 9:30 and asked him to send a short list of hard stops so I could memorize them before sleep. Harold's assistant answered 2 minutes later with the video link and a calendar block. The bracelet against my wrist cooled like a small night lake. Upstairs, the penthouse held the kind of clean silence I keep on purpose. I set my phone on this counter, rinsed the perfume and strangers out of my skin, and stood a moment at the window with the city breathing its slow blue. Naomi sent a short market update. After hours had ticked upward on a patent write-up that ran late afternoon and on chatter about a Sunday interview. She asked if we wanted to comment. I typed back no comment and added a second line that we do not attribute any move to social buzz or personal events. She responded with a thumbs you can feel without seeing. I set out a glass of water in the folder I use for live broadcast prep. I wrote 3 lines on a card to center my answers. Keep patience at the center. Speak in plain English. Leave drama at the door. I checked locks, set an early alarm, and slept hard for the first time all week. Morning arrived clear. Marcus was already outside by the curb for a short ride to the office, but I chose to walk the block and a half to let my head catch up with my feet. Harold dialed in exactly on time. His voice had the steady temperature of a boardroom on a day with weather. Thomas joined with a list of phrases to avoid and a reminder to keep any forward-looking language generic and to anchor it in already public documents. We walked the statement line by line. Janelle adjusted verbs so they landed without friction. Naomi logged decisions in a clean thread so there would be no drift later. We locked a simple media note. North Star focuses on real-world deployments in clinical and critical infrastructure settings. Our work prioritizes safety and independent audit. We do not comment on private family matters. Press inquiries go to PR. The note read like glass. It was enough. I took a second coffee and moved through likely question paths with Janelle. She played anchor with that soft, firm cadence that makes a live room feel cooler. We practiced a pivot back to patient outcomes when questions edged toward personality. We rehearsed a sentence on the MedSite integration that communicated progress without spilling the schedule. Thomas approved the phrasing and drew a box around 2 topics that should not be touched. The morning felt like an engine room running at the right temperature. Naomi sent a pulse at 11. Interest continued, but nothing overheated. She flagged 2 outlets in case we wanted to place a background. I told her to hold. She asked how to answer the handful of personal requests starting to appear in my inbox. I told her to decline with respect and to reiterate that I do not discuss family. She filed that template and the topic closed. The day had a balanced weight to it. The kind of cadence you can stand on. I stepped to the window and watched a small square of sun find the river and elongate. My phone buzzed with a number I did not recognize, and then a text arrived from Madison. The message was short and careful. She asked if we could meet for 10 minutes for something important. I considered the coming hours and the way clarity sounds when you hear it in your own voice. I replied with a time and place that made sense. 9 in the morning in the lobby cafe. The cup lids there click closed with a satisfying snap, and the light off the marble is kind. The lobby cafe was already awake, light sliding across marble, the hiss of milk and a low run of conversation that never tipped into noise. I arrived a few minutes early and sat at a small table near the window where I could watch the revolving door. The bracelet felt cool and steady. At exactly 9 in the morning, Madison stepped through the door with that measured calm I had noticed under the chandeliers. No entourage, no fuss, just a woman who knows where she is and why. She greeted the barista by name, picked up a glass of water, and joined me. She set her phone face down and folded her hands. Not a performance, simply a way to keep the conversation clean. She said she wanted to review the prenup before the wedding plans pushed everyone into autopilot. She said it was not about distrust and not about leverage. It was about protecting both people with the same care and making sure the math and the meaning lined up. She works in PR and knows what happens when dignity erodes by small inches. She wanted financial boundaries that respect both sides. I listened and let the room settle around us. She explained how she found the article last night. She keeps a set of Google alerts related to her clients and to the industries that intersect with their reputational risk. Northstar and Forbes both sit on that list. A friend in her old sorority chat sent the cover a few minutes after the alert pinged. She did not want to react to a headline. She wanted to read and verify, and then look at the person in front of her. I understood that rhythm. It is the only one I trust. She asked about public attention in the short term, and whether a media note would stabilize the narrative so the prenup conversation did not get swallowed by gossip. I told her my team would handle any statement and that it would be strictly about the work. No personal commentary, no family color, nothing that complicates what is simple. I made it clear I do not offer legal advice and I will not insert myself into decisions that belong to her and to Ethan. I said I respect fairness wherever it shows up, and I respect people who ask hard questions before a crisis forces them to. She nodded as if she had hoped for exactly that answer. The server brought 2 coffees and 2 small glasses of sparkling water. The lids clicked shut with a sound that felt like a decision landing. I asked if she had a counsel she trusts. She said both families have counsel, but she wanted an independent review that was not beholden to anyone's holiday table. She wants the agreement to protect future work and the work already done. She wants language that does not treat one person's labor as more real because of where it happens. I told her I understood the shape of that need. I told her I would not speak about any of this with my parents or with Ethan. She said she appreciated the line and would keep the same line on her side. We did not talk numbers. We did not trade confidences. We exchanged a clear understanding that respect shows up as a process. While she spoke, my phone buzzed once in my bag. Naomi had filed the calendar invite from last night and saved Madison's note as documentation with private identifiers masked. A small receipt of goodwill. I texted back a single word to confirm and put the phone away. Madison drew a small notebook from her purse and wrote down 3 items to raise with her attorney. She drew a square around the one about disclosure and confidentiality, so that future dinner fights could not turn into headlines by accident. Professional reflex, not paranoia. She asked one last practical question about Sunday. She wanted to know whether my on-air comments would steer clear of anything that could pull the family into the frame. I told her yes. We plan to keep every answer in the lane of patient outcomes, independent audit, and real deployment. She exhaled in a way that warmed the space between us. We finished our coffees without rushing. When we stood, she paused with a faint smile that was not for show. She said that the way I left the ballroom last night told her who I am more clearly than any article ever could. She said it helped her decide the kind of conversations she will and will not have from now on. I felt the bracelet cool against my wrist and nodded once. No dramatics, no vows, only a small shared understanding that would hold when the room changed temperature. She left first, walking toward the revolving door with the same exact posture she had when she read the screen under the chandelier. I stepped to the counter to thank the barista, then moved to the elevators. Naomi sent a short note that the morning looked calm and that legal and bored. We're set for the pre-brief. The lobby light brightened and slid across the floor like a fresh page. I pressed the button and waited with my hands quiet at my sides, ready to keep the day on its rails. Saturday afternoon settled over the city like a cool hand. I was at my kitchen counter with a glass of water and my laptop open when Naomi forwarded a formal email from Holbrook Capital. The sender line carried Samantha Cole, and the subject asked for verification of an incident at a private event. The body was precise. Their compliance office had initiated a preliminary review within 24 to 48 hours of a clip circulating publicly. They requested a factual confirmation of the time and place and whether I had been present for remarks that might affect the firm's standards. No personal data. No speculation. A simple record to anchor their process. I read it twice. Then I told Naomi to acknowledge receipt and to let Samantha know I would provide a brief factual account limited to event details and my own presence. I would not offer commentary about family members. Naomi created a thread in our legal folder and masked personal identifiers in the attachment list. Receipts belong where they can be found without being flaunted. Thomas called to confirm the safest way to answer. He suggested a 3-line reply that stated the venue, the approximate time window, and that I was present for a remark that described me in a negative way before a group of guests. He underlined that I should avoid adjectives and stick to nouns and verbs. I wrote the lines and read them aloud once. They sounded like a clean ledger. When I hit send, the apartment felt even quieter. I stood at the window while a blue line of lake sharpened and a bus exhaled at the light below. The phone rang with Ethan's name before I had taken 5 breaths. I let it buzz once and then answered because avoidance is not the same thing as a boundary. His voice came in hot, then cooled by degrees. He said I had made him look bad. He said the wrong narrative was forming. He said it was unfair that one moment counted more than everything else. I listened without adding heat. When there was a space, I told him I did not make him look bad. He chose words that did not respect me and other people heard them. I told him I had not posted anything and I was not giving interviews about my family. Silence thinned the line so much I could hear his breath find its own shape again. He shifted to logistics and fallout. Clients asking questions. A partner who wanted reassurance that character at off hours matches character on the clock. He said this was not reflective of who he is. I said the firm will decide what it is reflective of, and that I was not part of that decision. The bracelet at my wrist cooled and steadied my tone. I kept each sentence short enough to walk across. We did not reach an agreement. We reached an end of words. He hung up first. I set the phone down with care because anger makes a case for itself if you let your hands speak for you. I rinsed the glass and stacked it on a towel and let my heartbeat return to the room. Samantha's update arrived 40 minutes later. Her message was professional and spare. She wrote that the firm had decided to remove Ethan temporarily from a pending transaction while they completed their review due to brand risk considerations. She thanked me for the factual confirmation and said they did not need anything further from me at this time. There were no adjectives in her note either, just decisions. I forwarded the email to Thomas and archived it. Naomi logged the timestamps and added a line to our chronology file. Janelle asked if we wanted to anticipate questions about my brother in the Sunday interview. I told her no. We would stay with patients and systems and the work. We would not widen the frame. Evening light began to gather on the floor, a pale rectangle that moved toward the couch as the sun slipped behind a roofline. The family group call appeared on my screen. Linda started with a rush of concern that slid quickly into a request. Robert asked if there was a way to calm things down and stop the press from circling. Ethan said my email to HR had escalated everything. I said calmly that I had provided a fact when a formal request came in from a compliance office and that I had not posted, had not spoken to the press, and would not be making personal statements. I said I would not debate a compliance process on a family call. The line went quiet in a way that felt like a room after a door closes. No one wanted to be the person who put more words where the last words still hung. I told them I had a pre-brief in the morning and needed a clear head. I wished them a good night and left the call. The apartment took its shape again. Outside, a siren moved past and faded. I placed the phone face down on the counter and let the bracelet cool my skin until it matched the steadiness I needed. Sunday began crisp and bright over the river. Marcus eased the car to the curb in front of North Star, and I walked into a lobby that held the quiet of an early office. Naomi had coffee and a clean agenda waiting in the conference room. The screen lit with Harold first, then Thomas, then Janelle. We set the tone before the day could set it for us. Harold reminded us to respect the lanes. Public information only. No forward-looking specifics beyond what has already been filed. He wanted answers that sounded like steady work, not summer headlines. Thomas took the draft notes and ran his pen down the margin. He flagged 3 phrases that could be read as guidance and asked me to swap them for plain language that described what already exists. Janelle tuned the verbs so they landed without friction. Naomi captured each change in the doc so there would be no drift when the camera turned red. We reviewed the media note one last time. North Star focuses on technology that serves real patients and real infrastructure. Independent audit is built into deployment. Partnerships with public and private sectors are part of how the work reaches scale. No reference to personal matters. PR as point of contact. It read like glass, and everyone signed the same version with the same breath. Eleanor's assistant emailed while we were still on the call. The charity gala invitation now sat on the calendar for the following weekend. No panels, no spotlight, just a table and a clear path in and out. Janelle made a small note to coordinate with their comms lead so that our presence added calm rather than noise. Boundaries have logistics. We kept them intact. In the late morning, Marcus took me across town to the studio. The producer walked me through the set with the practiced warmth of someone who has held 1,000 nervous guests steady. I was not nervous. I was precise. The bracelet cooled my wrist, and my breath matched the count in my head. Janelle and I stood off to the side and ran one more round of possible pivots. If they asked about market moves, we would route back to patients and operations. If they asked about my week, we would route back to systems and outcomes. The map was simple, and we both knew it by heart. Under the lights, the studio air felt a few degrees colder. A tech fitted a small mic near my collar and made a quick adjustment. The anchor counted down with a professional smile that never touched too much of her face. I focused on the red light and the people who would never see this room, but would rely on the work to be boring in the best possible way. Questions came in even beats. What are you building that matters to a person in a hospital bed? How do you keep data safe without locking out the clinicians who need it? How do public institutions and private firms avoid talking past each other? I kept the answers in plain English. We design for interoperability, so no one is trapped in a system that does not serve them. We stage pilots with independent third-party review. We measure success by reduced wait time, reduced error, and the ability for a nurse on a hard shift to spend more time with a patient and less time wrestling a screen. I named partnerships only where they were already public. I said we do not sell miracles. We ship tools that behave. The anchor tried for a soft angle on leadership and balance. I said routine keeps teams steady, clear goals and quiet rooms. I did not turn the conversation toward my family. I did not offer a narrative beyond the work. When the segment closed, the producer lifted a hand with a small smile that meant the beats had landed and the clock had been respected. The tech unclipped the mic and wished me a good Sunday. Outside the studio doors, the city felt warmer. Janelle scrolled her dashboard while we waited for the car. Early notes looked calm. Pickups focused on the technology and on the way independent audit sits inside the process. No breathless angles. Naomi texted that the afternoon remained steady, and that our media note had been shared back to the outlets that asked for comment. Thomas sent a one-line approval to say that nothing strayed beyond our file. We reached the office again just long enough for me to look out at the river and let my eyes rest. The broadcast would air that evening. I did not plan to watch it. I had already lived the parts that mattered. Marcus drove me home through neighborhoods that looked like late summer, and I let the car hum be the only sound. As the sun went down, texts came in light and professional. A physician I trust wrote that the plain language helped. A hospital admin wrote that the emphasis on audit was the right call. Janelle sent a pulse that sentiment after the airing was positive and free of personal drift. I told her we would keep silent around private matters and let the statement do the talking. She answered with a simple, "Got it," and logged the decision. I set my phone face down on the counter and stood at the window. The city held its lights like a steady constellation. The bracelet rested cool against my skin. The week ahead would ask different things of me, but tonight, the work held its shape, and the noise stayed outside the glass. Monday morning opened clear and spare. I walked into Dr. Pierce's office with a cup of tea I did not drink, and sat in the chair that let my ribs widen. The small clock on the side table did not tick. I told her the weekend had been held. The bracelet felt cool on my wrist. She asked what part of me needed attention, and the answer arrived before thought. The part that still wants a door that is not there. I traced the old pattern out loud. Years of offering results to earn a kind of approval that only moved when it made someone else shine. Every time I reached for it, the room changed shape. At the party, I recognized the tug and chose quiet instead. It felt like standing on dry ground while a current rushed past. Dr. Pierce asked where that quiet lives in my body. I said in the back of my throat and the space between my shoulders. She said, "Forgiveness can sit inside a closed door." She said I can care for myself and keep the lock turned. My breath dropped lower. The chair felt larger. I wrote one sentence in my head and it stayed. I do not owe anyone access to the part of me that runs the engine. We named what the next day would ask. Stability at work. Healthy distance at home. I practiced 2 lines I could use when conversations tried to widen into excuses. I am not discussing family. I wish you well, and I am leaving this topic. No blame. Only direction. The bracelet cooled and steadied my pulse. Before I left, she asked for one small commitment. 1 hour this week, without news or email. I said yes, and meant it. The afternoon held a scheduled call with Judge Miriam Cole, who manages the Bennett Family Trust. Her voice carried that flat firmness of a person who has lived inside rules long enough to respect why they exist. She confirmed receipt of a video clip from the event and a written description of timing and location submitted through proper channels. She explained that the trust contains a clause against public disparagement that applies to any adult beneficiary. Public disparagement covers conduct in a public setting when there is credible evidence such as video. The clause does not care about gossip. It cares about documented behavior. When such conduct occurs, a review process starts to determine whether and how a beneficiary's distributions will be adjusted for a period defined by the trust language. She laid out the steps the way a good map lays out the road. Notice to relevant parties. Collection of materials. Independent review by counsel for the trust. Temporary adjustments if required by the text. Final notice after the review. There was no heat in it, only process. She asked whether I had any requests or whether I wanted to submit a statement beyond what I already provided. I said I wanted the rule applied fairly to everyone and that I was not asking for anything more. I said I was not lobbying and I would not be following up except to respond if the trustee needed clarification. She acknowledged that and said no action from me was required at this time. We ended the call clean. I stood at the window and watched clouds move behind a building with a green roof. The city sounded like late afternoon. Somewhere a truck backed up, and somewhere a dog barked twice. I felt a mix of steadiness and grief that did not contradict each other. Holding boundaries can be both. Naomi sent a light update. Calendar clean. Board content from Sunday archived. Media note handling questions with zero drift. Janelle pinged to say the gala team had confirmed our low-profile plan for the weekend. Thomas added a line that he would monitor any legal cross-currents and would keep me insulated unless something required my attention. The engine room hummed the way it should. Near 5, my phone buzzed with a number I knew by muscle memory. Ethan's text arrived without greeting. He wrote a single thought distilled to fear. That I was going to take everything from him. I let the screen sit on the counter for a minute so my hands could decide not to answer with adrenaline. Then I typed what was true. I said I was not taking anything. I said the trust has rules and the trustee enforces them. I said he needed to learn how to speak about people with respect. I put the phone face down and felt the bracelet cool against my skin until my breath matched it. The room shifted back into the shape of my life. A pot on the stove clicked softly as it cooled. Outside, early evening gathered at the edges of the glass. The day had begun with a chair and a closed door in my mind. It ended with a rule set moving forward without my push, and a peace that came from not pulling at it. I stood there until the light changed, and then turned toward the next task on my list. The middle of the week carried a quieter light. I cleared a short stack of emails and saw Madison's name. Her note was concise and even. She had decided to pause the wedding timeline while counsel finished a full review of the prenup. She wanted financial boundaries that respected both careers, and she wanted the paperwork to reflect the dignity she protects for clients every day. The reason lived inside her work ethic. No drama, only process. I typed a brief acknowledgement and respect for her decision and closed the thread. Samantha from Holbrook arrived next with a formal update. The preliminary review had produced an interim outcome. Ethan would step back from 2 active projects for the rest of the quarter. He would complete an ethics module before any reassignment. He had issued an internal apology addressed to staff and compliance. He had sent private letters to the host and to the Price family. There would be no social posts. The language read like policy and not emotion. That steadiness was its own message. Naomi logged the timestamps in our chronology file and pinned the thread where counsel could find it. Janelle checked in on a small rumor that I had been rude to staff at the party. She asked if we could keep one soft receipt ready in case it spread. Diego had sent an email at 9:12 in the morning on Saturday. He thanked me for catching a near spill and for helping move glassware when the rush pressed his team. His words were simple and human. I told Janelle she could use a masked screenshot only if needed and only with identifying details removed. She filed it under a low-heat tab and moved on. By early evening, I drove to Evanston with the windows down to let the lake air settle my shoulders. The house looked the same as always. Family photos along the hall. The bowl of lemons near the sink. The good napkins laid flat. We ate roast chicken and green beans, and the kind of rolls you tear apart without thinking. Conversation moved in short starts and stops. The quiet felt like a picture hung a little to the left. Linda tried first. Her apology tripped on its own feet. She said the jokes had felt small until they were not. Embarrassment colored the backs of her hands. She reached for a version of me that fit a familiar story, and then saw it was gone. Robert followed with a slower admission. Pride and presentation had braided together in his head. He was trying to separate them. He spoke as if he wanted each word to land where it belonged, and not on me. I kept my voice plain. I said I would attend essential family occasions. I said I would leave any table where belittling began. I said I had not filed a complaint anywhere, and I had not lobbied anyone. I had asked for fair rules to be applied by the people who hold that responsibility. I said we would not discuss family in public or with outsiders. I said I would not debate intentions when behavior had already been documented. The bracelet cooled against my skin while the words made their own shape. Ethan sat with his hands folded and his eyes on a point between plate and table. He looked tired in a way that asked for effort from himself and not rescue from me. When I finished, he nodded once. It was not agreement and not defiance. It was a small mark of understanding that boundaries had arrived and would not be moved by mood. We cleared plates and carried coffee into the living room. The television stayed dark. Linda offered leftovers and then let the offer drop when she realized the gesture would not do the work for her. She pressed her fingers to her necklace and held them there until the habit ran out of meaning. Robert talked about a neighbor's new roof and then let silence land where it needed to. The house felt less performative. It felt like people in a room rather than a room pretending for people. Naomi sent a quiet status from my pocket. The media stayed calm. The gala had confirmed seating that kept a simple path in and out. No surprises, no angles. I put the phone away and returned to the room. I told my parents I believe change happens when discomfort has time to do its slow work. I said my participation would depend on patterns and not promises. The sentence did not sting. It just sat there and asked to be met. Diego's email drifted back through my mind. Ordinary kindness has a way of anchoring bigger things. It reminded me that decency does not require an audience, and that receipts can be soft and still hold. Robert set his cup down and looked at me without reaching for the old need to impress a room that does not exist. He said he was proud of how I handled the week. He did not add a clause or a condition. He let it stand. For a second, the air in the house felt level and real. I rose to go. Ethan walked me to the door and did not fill the space with a fix. Outside, the Evanston evening had the clean sky of late summer and a line of trees just beginning to think about fall. I touched the bracelet and the cool of it held. A few weeks later, the city had changed shade without changing shape. North Star moved in a clean arc. The MedSite workstream fed our pipeline, and the Sunday interview kept attention in the lane of outcomes and audit. Meetings felt like work rather than weather. Janelle's dashboard stayed even. Thomas watched the edges. Harold kept the board pointed at patient value. No one in our rooms talked about parties or family labels. The air stayed professional, and the ground stayed level. The trust process advanced in its quiet way. Judge Cole sent the scheduled notices and kept the review inside the text. A temporary reduction touched Ethan's distributions while the file moved through council. No one was happy. No one was surprised. Rules have a way of sounding blunt until they protect the same people who dislike them. I kept my hands out of it and my comments inside the walls of my own life. At Holbrook, the interim measures were held. Ethan completed the ethics module and logged the time. Samantha sent a neutral line that confirmed receipt. He kept his head down and let his work talk. He was not loud in family threads. He did not try to bend a room to his shape. When apologies came, they landed without a comma that asked for comfort in return. I did not offer a prize for decency. I offered space that did not close. Dinner with my parents felt less like a stage and more like a table. Linda set out a casserole and asked about a research update, like a person who wants to understand a little more than last time. Robert talked about weather and traffic, and then let silences be ordinary rather than dangerous. When a story drifted toward old habits, I put my fork down and their eyes tracked the gesture. The conversation eased back to the center without anyone saying the word boundary. Madison texted on a Thursday morning when the light had a crisp edge. She asked if I had time for 10 minutes at the lobby cafe. I wrote back yes. We met at the same corner table where the lids click-closed on cups with a small certain sound. She arrived on time. She looked rested and unhurried the way people look when they have decided to live inside their own integrity, even if it costs a timeline. She said she needed more time to let counsel finish, and to let the family adjust to a new kind of honesty. She said the work she does for clients depends on a reputation that does not wobble. She wanted to protect that and protect the partnership if it is going to be a marriage rather than a campaign. She did not ask me to fix anything. She asked for respect for the pace that keeps both of them whole. I told her I heard her. I told her a pause can be taken care rather than punishment. We finished our coffees without filling the air with predictions. At the door, she pressed my forearm lightly. 2 women in a busy city on a weekday morning. No headlines. Just a small human note that says, "I saw what you did, and it helped me do what I needed to do." At the office, Dr. Noor sent an integration update with details about a hospital pilot that shaved minutes from a workflow that steals hours from nurses. That kind of metric carries more charge for me than a chart line ever will. Naomi flagged it for a team newsletter that sounds like clear water and not like marketing. Janelle placed a short case study without adjectives. Thomas smiled with the eyes of a man who lives on the safe side of a rule set and still likes the work it enables. Evenings found their routine again. I cooked simple food and read pages without scrolling. The bracelet felt cool and familiar. On a clear Friday night, the river held a dark shine, and 3 kayaks moved under a bridge like small, silent commas. I stood at the window and watched the city hold its lights in a way that looked like intention. I thought about the girl who wanted a door that never opened, and the woman who learned to stand on her own floor and lock the right rooms. Approval is a moving target. Respect is a practice. I chose the practice. Ethan sent a shorter note that did not ask for anything. He wrote that he finished the course and that he was working on listening without drafting a defense while the other person is still speaking. I answered with a simple acknowledgement. He will do his work, or he will not. My job is not to supervise his growth. My job is to be responsible for my side of the street. I met Madison one more time that week for a quick coffee. We talked about nothing heavy for 7 minutes. Then she said she needed more time for everything to be clear. I said I understood. We walked out into the hallway and the marble held the light the way it always does. We left each other lighter. That night I stood at the glass in River North and let the bracelet sit cold on my wrist until the temperature reached my breathing. The skyline ran deep and steady, and the river kept its slow pulse. I did not chase a nod from anyone. I did my work. I kept my lines. I let gratitude be the frame. It was enough. If you have ever been labeled a family failure and had to build a life anyway, how will you draw your lines so they keep you safe and honor who you are? Tell me how you would do it in the comments so the rest of us can learn the shape of boundaries that hold. Stay with this channel if the story helps you find your footing.
Your savings are now my luxury villa. Amanda's text lit up my phone screen at 3 a.m. Thanks for being such a trusting sister-in-law. The view from my new balcony is going to be amazing. I stared at the message, my hand steady as I held my phone. The soft glow of my laptop was the only light in my home office, where I'd been waiting for this exact moment. Another text buzzed through. Don't bother checking your accounts. I've already transferred everything. Sweet dreams. My name is Olivia Chen, and at 34, I just watched my sister-in-law attempt to steal what she thought was my entire life savings. I should have been panicking, crying, or at least angry. Instead, I felt an odd sense of calm as I opened my banking app. The account showed exactly what I expected. $800,000 transferred out at 2:47 a.m. to an account I didn't recognize. I took a screenshot, adding it to my growing file of evidence. Then I sent Amanda a simple reply. Thanks for letting me know. I could almost picture her face as she read my response, her smug smile faltering just slightly at my lack of distress. She'd been planning this for months, probably expecting hysterical phone calls or desperate pleas. Instead, she got 2 words and radio silence. What Amanda didn't know was that I'm a forensic accountant. I spend my days tracking financial fraud and helping clients protect their assets. More importantly, she had no idea that the account she just emptied was a carefully crafted trap, set up 6 months ago when I first noticed her unusual interest in my finances. It started with casual questions at family dinners. How do you manage your money, Olivia? She'd ask, eyes sharp despite her relaxed tone. It must be nice having such a cushion to fall back on. My brother Mark, ever oblivious to his wife's schemes, would just smile and nod along. Then came the accidental glimpses of my bank statements when she visited, the careful mentions of her dream villa in the Mediterranean, and the not-so-subtle hints about family helping family. I recognized the signs. I'd seen them countless times in my work. The gradual gathering of information, the careful grooming of their target, the search for vulnerabilities. So I prepared. The account Amanda just emptied was real enough to withstand basic scrutiny. But every transaction had been carefully documented and reported to the authorities in advance. Each withdrawal she made would trigger automatic alerts to both my lawyer and the bank's fraud department. I opened my laptop and checked my secure email. Right on schedule, there were 3 notifications. One from the bank confirming suspicious activity, one from my lawyer acknowledging the predicted transfer, and one from the fraud investigation team requesting confirmation to proceed. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark, my brother. Olivia, we need to talk. Amanda told me what she did. Please don't do anything rash. She's just trying to give us a better life. I felt a familiar ache in my chest. Mark had always been protective of me after our parents died, but his marriage to Amanda 3 years ago had changed him. He'd become increasingly distant, defensive, and willing to justify Amanda's behavior, no matter how outrageous. Nothing rash, I typed back. Get some sleep, Mark. We'll talk tomorrow. I thought about the real money, safely secured in accounts Amanda would never find. The $800,000 she'd stolen was substantial, but it was a calculated sacrifice, enough to trigger serious legal consequences, but not enough to actually damage my financial security. Another text from Amanda. Don't bother calling Mark. He supports me 100%. You've always had it too easy anyway. It's time someone else got to enjoy the good life. I added the text to my evidence file. Each message was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. I'd learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy was to let people reveal their true nature on their own terms. The last piece of my trap was already in motion. Before setting up the decoy account, I'd met with the real estate agent Amanda had been working with. The agent, alarmed by some irregularities in Amanda's loan application, had been more than willing to cooperate with my investigation. The villa Amanda thought she was buying. The down payment would go through, but the transaction would immediately trigger a fraud alert. By attempting to purchase property with stolen funds, she wasn't just committing theft. She was engaging in international wire fraud. I poured myself a glass of water and watched the sunrise from my office window. In a few hours, Amanda would probably be celebrating her victory with expensive champagne, planning her new life in the Mediterranean sun. She had no idea she just walked into a trap that would cost her everything. My phone buzzed one final time. A photo from Amanda, her holding a glass of champagne. The contract for the villa clearly visible on the table in front of her. Au revoir, she wrote. Don't worry, I'll send you a postcard from my new villa. I smiled, saving the photo. In the background of her celebratory shot, I could clearly see the fraudulent wire transfer documentation. It was the final piece of evidence I needed. I sent one last text to my lawyer. She took the bait, everything proceeding as planned. Then I went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring chaos, but for now I had the peace of knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Amanda's celebratory tone from last night had shifted dramatically, replaced by increasingly frantic messages. What's wrong with the transfer? Why is the bank calling me? Answer or your fate on me. You did something, didn't you? I took my time getting ready, brewing my favorite coffee and settling into my home office before responding to anyone. The bank's fraud department had already sent their morning update. Amanda's attempt to wire the money internationally had been flagged and frozen. Her dream villa was slipping through her fingers. Mark's messages were different, a mix of anger and desperation. How could you do this to us? Amanda's crying. She said you set her up. We're family, Olivia. Family helps family. I thought about my brother, about the way he changed since meeting Amanda 3 years ago. He'd gone from my protective older brother to someone who enabled his wife's worst impulses, all in the name of family. At exactly 9 a.m., I called my lawyer, Sarah Douglas. Good morning, she answered, sounding pleased. I assume you've seen the notifications. The bank's fraud department is building quite a case. What's our next step? I asked, taking notes as she outlined the proceedings. The bank had frozen not just the stolen funds, but all of Amanda's accounts. The international wire transfer attempt had triggered multiple fraud alerts, and her previous financial activities were now under scrutiny. She's been busy, Sarah noted. The bank found evidence of other suspicious transfers. Looks like you weren't her first target, just her biggest. That didn't surprise me. In my work as a forensic accountant, I learned that financial predators rarely started with big scores. They built up to them, testing boundaries and perfecting their techniques. My doorbell rang at 10:30 a.m. Through the security camera, I saw Amanda standing there, makeup perfect but her designer outfit slightly disheveled. Mark hovered behind her, looking uncomfortable. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. Yes. How dare you? Amanda hissed, trying to push past me. You ruined everything. The bank froze all our accounts. The villa seller is threatening legal action. This is all your fault. I stayed calm, remembering the security cameras recording every moment. My fault. You tried to steal my savings, Amanda. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Notice? You trapped me. She was practically screaming now. You set up that account on purpose. You wanted this to happen. Amanda, I said quietly, you just admitted to stealing my money. On camera. Would you like to confess to anything else while you're here? She stepped back, finally noticing the security cameras. Mark put his hand on her shoulder, trying to pull her away. Olivia, please, he pleaded. We can work this out. Just tell the bank it was a misunderstanding. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The confident, protective older brother I'd grown up with was gone, replaced by someone who would rather enable theft than face an uncomfortable truth. It's not that simple, I explained. The bank's fraud department is involved now. They found other suspicious transfers in Amanda's history. This goes beyond just me. Amanda's face went pale. You're lying. They can't look at my other accounts. They can when you attempt international wire fraud. Every transaction you've made in the last 7 years is being reviewed. Mark's hand dropped from Amanda's shoulder. Other accounts? Amanda, what is she talking about? But Amanda was already backing away, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. This isn't fair. You had all that money just sitting there, and I needed it more than you did. The villa was supposed to be our fresh start. A fresh start built on stolen money? I shook my head. The police will be contacting you soon. I suggest you get a lawyer. As they left, I heard Amanda starting to cry, telling Mark none of this was her fault, that I was just jealous of their happiness. But I could see doubt creeping into my brother's expression for the first time. Inside, I found more messages waiting. The bank wanted to schedule a formal interview. The fraud department had uncovered transfers from at least 3 other victims. Sarah had already started preparing documentation for a civil suit. I sat down at my desk, pulling up the file I'd been building for months. Every suspicious question Amanda had asked about my finances, every accidental glimpse of my bank statements, every conversation about her dreams of Mediterranean luxury. It was all documented, painting a clear picture of premeditation. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. The bank called. They're saying Amanda stole from other people too. Tell me you didn't know about this. I suspected, I replied honestly. That's why I was prepared. I don't know what to believe anymore, he wrote back. She's locked herself in our bedroom, calling everyone we know for loans. She keeps saying you tricked her, but did I miss something? Was I blind? My heart ached for him. Come over tomorrow, I suggested. We need to talk. Just us. That evening, I received an email from the villa's real estate agent. Amanda's wire transfer had been rejected, and they were filing their own fraud report. Her dream of Mediterranean luxury had officially died. More messages poured in as word spread. Other victims of Amanda's financial manipulation started coming forward, sharing similar stories. She'd taken advantage of family connections, used emotional manipulation, and always played the victim when confronted. I thought about the moment 6 months ago when I first suspected Amanda was targeting me. I could have confronted her then, could have warned her off, or exposed her schemes immediately. But years of working in forensic accounting had taught me that people like Amanda never stopped until they faced real consequences. By setting my trap and letting her walk into it, I hadn't just protected myself. I created an opportunity for all her victims to find justice. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the results of their own actions. As night fell, I sat in my quiet house, looking through old family photos. There was Mark at my college graduation, beaming with pride. Us at our parents' last anniversary party. Holidays, birthdays, countless moments before Amanda entered our lives and twisted everything. I miss you, I texted Mark. The real you. Minutes passed before his response. I miss me too. The next 3 months unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony, each revelation adding to Amanda's downfall. The bank's investigation uncovered a pattern of financial manipulation spanning 5 years. Beyond the 3 victims we initially knew about, 4 more came forward with similar stories. Mark showed up at my door one rainy evening, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The police interviewed me today, he said, slumping onto my couch. They showed me everything. All the transfers, the manipulation, the lies. How did I not see it? I handed him a cup of coffee and sat beside him. She was good at what she did. That's why she got away with it for so long. Did you know, he said, staring into his cup, she was planning to leave me once she had the villa? The police found emails to some guy in Greece. She was going to take the money and just disappear. I hadn't known that detail, but it didn't surprise me. Amanda had always seen Mark as a means to an end, a stepping stone to the luxury lifestyle she craved. The criminal charges came down like hammer blows. Multiple counts of fraud, attempted wire fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. Amanda's lawyer pushed for a plea deal, but the evidence was too overwhelming. My careful documentation, combined with the bank's investigation, had created an airtight case. 7 years, Mark told me after the sentencing, plus restitution to all the victims. He'd filed for divorce the week before, finally accepting that the woman he'd married was a carefully crafted illusion. My $800,000 was returned, though I'd never actually been at risk. The real satisfaction came from helping Amanda's other victims recover their losses. My testimony as a forensic accountant, combined with the evidence I gathered, ensured they all received restitution. Late one night, I received a letter from Amanda, sent from prison. "You think you're so clever, setting me up like that. But you ruined everything. I had dreams, plans. That villa was supposed to be my fresh start. I hope you're happy with yourself, sitting in your perfect little house with your perfect little life. You'll always be alone." I filed the letter with the others, evidence of her unrepentant nature. She still didn't understand that this wasn't about cleverness or winning. It was about justice, about protecting people from predators who saw family ties as weapons to exploit. Mark started therapy, working through the trauma of Amanda's betrayal. Slowly, I saw glimpses of my old brother returning. We began having weekly dinners together, rebuilding the bond that Amanda had nearly destroyed. "You know what's funny?" he said during one of these dinners. "When Amanda first told me she'd taken your money, she was so proud of herself. She kept saying how she'd finally won, how she'd beaten the smart sister-in-law at her own game." I smiled, remembering her smug texts. She never realized the game was already over before she started playing. 6 months after Amanda's sentencing, I received an unexpected email from one of her victims. She'd started a support group for survivors of financial exploitation, and they wanted me to speak about fraud prevention. Standing in front of those people, sharing the knowledge that had protected me and ultimately helped catch Amanda, I felt like something good had finally come from all this. Mark found me after the presentation. "That was amazing," he said, hugging me tightly. "Mom and Dad would be so proud of you." I hugged him back, feeling the strength of our restored bond. Amanda had tried to steal more than money. She tried to steal my relationship with my brother. In the end, she'd lost everything while we'd grown stronger. The $800,000 trap I'd set wasn't just about catching a thief. It was about showing that sometimes the best defense is being prepared, that knowledge and patience are more powerful than greed and manipulation. Amanda never understood that true wealth isn't just about money in an account. It's about integrity, family, and justice. My security cameras caught the last time Amanda's expensive car pulled away from my house. Sometimes I watch that footage and think about how confident she was, how certain of her victory. She never realized she wasn't the predator in this story. She was the prey, caught in a trap of her own making.